A cowboy's dog returns with a weary Apache woman, and nothing will ever be the same again. Samuel had always lived a quiet life. The land he called home stretched out for miles under the endless sky, rolling gently with patches of tall grass, clusters of sagebrush, and the occasional gnarled tree that had somehow survived the harsh winds. The sun rose slowly over the horizon, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. In the early morning, the air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of earth and dew. To some, this might have seemed lonely, even harsh, but to Samuel it was peaceful. He had learned to find comfort in the simplicity of his life. Samuel was a cowboy by nature and by choice. He had grown up on a ranch not far from this land, learning from his father how to tend animals, mend fences, and ride horses with steady hands. Life had taught him patience, and the rhythm of daily work became a kind of meditation. Each morning he rose before dawn, fed the horses and cattle, checked the fences, and made sure the water troughs were full. Rusty, his loyal dog, always followed him, trotting alongside with a quiet pride and a knowing look in his eyes. Rusty was more than a companion. He was a shadow of Samuel's heart, sharing in every long day and quiet night. The ranch was not particularly large, but it was enough. Samuel had a small wooden house that he had built himself, a barn that had stood for decades, and a corral for the animals. The house was modest, with simple furniture and a stove that warmed the space on cold nights. There was a rocking chair by the window, where Samuel liked to sit and watch the sunset, letting his mind wander with the colors in the sky. He did not have many visitors, and he preferred it that way. Letters from townsfolk arrived occasionally, bringing news or requests for help, but mostly he lived alone, finding company in Rusty and the land itself. Samuel's days were predictable, almost sacred in their routine. He had learned to enjoy the little moments that most people might overlook. The sound of the wind rustling through the grass, the smell of fresh earth after rain, the quiet companionship of a dog that never judged or complained. Life could be hard, and there were times when storms tore across the plains, flattening fences and scaring the animals. But Samuel faced each challenge with steady hands and calm resolve. He knew that survival in this part of the world was not about strength alone. It was about patience, observation, and a deep understanding of the land. Rusty had been with Samuel for many years, rescued as a puppy from a nearby creek where he had been abandoned. The dog had grown into a strong, intelligent companion, capable of reading Samuel's moods almost better than any human. Rusty had a sharp sense of danger and an even sharper loyalty. Whenever Samuel felt the tiniest unease, a rustle in the brush or the distant cry of an animal, Rusty would be there, ears perked, ready to act. Samuel often joked that Rusty was his guardian, though in truth, the dog was more like a reflection of Samuel himself, patient, alert, and deeply connected to the world around him. That morning began like any other. The sky was painted with soft pinks and oranges, and the air had a freshness that promised a good day ahead. Samuel poured feed into the troughs for the horses, watched the cattle graze quietly in the distance, and then took a moment to lean against the fence, letting the warmth of the rising sun touch his face. Rusty padded around him, sniffing the ground and wagging his tail with a gentle enthusiasm. There was a calmness in the moment that made Samuel feel at peace, but then Rusty stiffened. His ears went straight up, his nose twitching as he sniffed the air. Samuel followed the dog's gaze to the edge of the creek, where the brush swayed unnaturally. "What is it, boy?" Samuel asked, his voice low. Rusty growled softly, a sound that Samuel had learned to take seriously. Something or someone was out there. Samuel's heart beat a little faster, though he could not tell why. The land was familiar, the paths and trees known, yet there was a sudden sense of the unknown, as if the earth itself had shifted for a moment. Rusty darted into the brush before Samuel could stop him. Samuel frowned. The dog had never run off without him before, not for long. Samuel wiped his hands on his pants and followed, calling softly, "Rusty." "Come back." The creek was shallow, the water moving lazily over smooth stones, but the thick brush on the far side hid whatever had caught Rusty's attention. Samuel pushed through the undergrowth, careful not to make too much noise, and then paused. Rusty was gone. For a moment, Samuel's stomach tightened. The dog was usually fearless, but something about this morning felt different. He waited, scanning the trees and tall grass. Minutes passed. The sun climbed higher and Samuel's unease grew. He whistled softly, hoping Rusty would hear him, but there was no reply. Samuel knew the land well, knew where the animal trails were, and yet there was no sign of Rusty. He began to feel that strange combination of worry and anticipation, the feeling that something significant was about to happen, something that might change the quiet rhythm of his life. By noon, Samuel returned to the ranch, hoping Rusty would have found his way back. He checked the fences, made sure the water troughs were full, and called again for the dog. Still, there was no answer. Samuel tried to keep his mind occupied with work, repairing a broken section of fence near the north pasture, but every few minutes he paused to listen, hoping to hear the familiar bark or the patter of paws. The sun was high now, bright and warm, but it did nothing to ease the worry settling in Samuel's chest. He remembered the first day he had found Rusty, shaking and small beside the creek, alone in the wide world. That memory gave him strength. Samuel knew he could handle whatever came next, whatever the day would bring. Yet, deep down, he could not shake the feeling that this was no ordinary disappearance. Rusty was loyal, intelligent, and brave. He would not wander aimlessly. Something or someone had caught his attention, and Samuel had a sinking feeling that it might not be an ordinary encounter. As the afternoon stretched on, Samuel continued his work, his eyes frequently scanning the brush, his ears alert to every sound. He fed the horses again, checked the cattle, and mended the fence with careful, practiced movements. Still, Rusty did not return. The sun began its slow descent, turning the sky into shades of pink and gold once more. Samuel stood in the middle of the pasture, looking toward the creek, feeling the emptiness of the land around him in a way he never had before. The quiet that had always been comforting now felt heavy, almost expectant. Finally, as the first stars began to appear, a familiar sound broke the stillness, the soft padding of paws on the earth. Samuel's heart leapt. Rusty. He ran toward the sound, calling the dog's name. And then he saw him, not alone, but with someone else. A figure walked behind Rusty, hunched and weary, wrapped in tattered clothing. Samuel froze. He had never seen her before, and yet something about her presence made the world feel suddenly different. Rusty nudged her gently, urging her forward, as if asking Samuel to trust her. Samuel lowered his hands, trying to keep his surprise in check. The woman's face was tired, her eyes wary but alert. She did not speak, yet her expression carried a story that words could not capture. Samuel felt a strange mixture of curiosity, caution, and a growing sense that this moment marked the beginning of something he could not yet understand. Rusty barked softly, wagging his tail, happy to be home, but also insistent that Samuel pay attention to the woman with him. That night Samuel built a fire outside his small house. Rusty lay beside it, ears twitching, alert to every sound in the dark. The woman stayed a few steps back, watching Samuel with careful eyes, and Samuel, in turn, observed her with a mix of wonder and concern. He did not know who she was, where she had come from, or why she was here, but he sensed that his life, so long filled with quiet routine, was about to change in ways he could never have imagined. Samuel felt a strange excitement, mingled with fear. For the first time in many years, the world seemed larger than his small ranch, full of possibilities and mysteries. He had no idea what the coming days would bring, but as he watched the woman and Rusty together under the firelight, He knew that nothing in his life would ever be the same again. The morning after the unexpected arrival, Samuel woke to a quiet house. The soft light of dawn spilled through the window, painting the wooden floor with shades of gold. Rusty was already up, pacing by the door, his ears perked as if listening for something unseen. Samuel rubbed his eyes, still feeling the surprise of the night before. The woman, he still did not know her name, was sitting just outside the doorway, wrapped in a worn blanket. Her eyes, tired but sharp, followed his every move. Samuel hesitated for a moment, unsure how to approach her. He had lived alone for so long that any interruption to his routine felt strange, yet there was something in her presence that demanded care, respect, and attention. He moved slowly, keeping his hands visible, and spoke in his soft, calm voice. "Good morning. I'm Samuel. You can stay here." The woman blinked, and for a moment her face betrayed a flicker of relief. She did not speak, but she gave a slight nod, as if acknowledging the words. Rusty, sensing the tension and the need for calm, trotted over to the woman, circling her gently before settling beside her. The dog leaned against her leg, his head resting on the blanket. She reached down and stroked his fur, a small, tentative gesture that seemed to speak of gratitude. Samuel watched quietly. He realized that while he could not understand her words, there was a language in gestures, in kindness, and in shared presence that needed no translation. Breakfast was simple. Samuel brought out some bread and a little dried meat, setting it on a wooden table outside the house. The woman watched him, eyes wide, and after a long pause she reached out to take a small piece. Samuel smiled faintly. He did not know what she had endured or where she had come from, but he understood that survival often demanded small acts of trust. Rusty ate nearby, keeping a careful watch on both of them, as if ensuring the fragile peace remained unbroken. As the day unfolded, Samuel showed her the ranch, moving slowly and deliberately so as not to frighten her. He pointed to the water trough, demonstrating how the animals drank, and motioned toward the barn, indicating where she could rest if needed. The woman followed him cautiously, her movements careful but deliberate. Samuel noticed her strength, even in her exhaustion. There was a quiet confidence in the way she carried herself, a sense that she had faced hardships far beyond the ordinary. Rusty continued to serve as a bridge between them. Whenever Samuel would stop, unsure how to communicate, Rusty nudged her gently, encouraging interaction. At one point, Samuel noticed her examining the horses, her fingers tracing the animal's mane, her expression thoughtful. Samuel nodded, offering a small smile. She returned it with a slight tilt of her head, a gesture that felt almost like a greeting. It was slow, painstaking work to build trust, but Samuel had learned patience from the land, from the animals, and from years of living quietly. By midday, Samuel and the woman were working together in small ways. She helped carry water from the creek, careful to watch her footing, while Samuel guided her with hand gestures and soft words. He found himself talking to her more than he expected, describing the land, the animals, and even the small routines he followed. She listened with keen attention, nodding or pointing occasionally to indicate understanding. Samuel realized that language was only part of communication. Empathy, observation, and shared experience mattered just as much. The sun climbed high, and the heat of the day pressed down on the ranch. Samuel took a moment to rest under the shade of a tree, watching the woman who now sat a few steps away, quietly examining a bundle of wildflowers she had gathered from the field. There was a rhythm to their day, slow and deliberate, and yet each moment carried a growing sense of connection. Samuel felt a curiosity he had not experienced in years. Who was she? Where had she come from? What had led her to this lonely place? The questions lingered, unanswered, but Samuel sensed that answers would come in their own time. In the afternoon, Samuel took a horse out to check the fences further along the northern edge of the property. Rusty ran ahead, the woman following on foot, careful to keep a safe distance. Samuel had expected her to be hesitant, but she moved with surprising steadiness, keeping her balance on the uneven ground. At one point, she stopped near a small patch of wild sage, crouching to examine it closely. Samuel slowed his horse and watched her quietly, feeling a sense of admiration for her curiosity and attention to detail. She had the patience of someone who had survived through observation and care. By the time they returned to the ranch, the sky was painted with the warm colors of sunset. Samuel built another small fire outside, careful to keep it controlled and safe. Rusty lay down beside the woman once again, his presence a constant comfort. Samuel brought over some food for her, offering it with a gentle nod. She took it without hesitation this time, her movements more relaxed than before. Samuel felt a quiet relief, recognizing the small progress in trust. As night fell, the stars began to appear, scattered across the darkening sky like tiny lanterns. Samuel sat on the porch, Rusty at his feet, and the woman a few steps away, quietly observing the firelight. The silence between them was not uncomfortable. It was filled with a kind of understanding, a shared awareness of the day that had passed and the unknown days yet to come. Samuel realized that he had never felt this kind of anticipation or uncertainty in his life before. There was a sense of possibility, of new beginnings, and of challenges he could not yet foresee. He thought about the routines he had followed for so long, the quiet and predictable life he had built. Now, everything seemed different. The woman's presence had altered the rhythm of his days, bringing a new energy, a new responsibility. Samuel understood that his solitude was no longer absolute, and for the first time he felt both apprehension and hope. Rusty shifted his position, nudging Samuel's hand, as if sharing in the recognition that life on the ranch would never be the same. The woman, who Samuel still did not know by name, had not yet spoken, but there was a sense of cautious optimism in her demeanor. She had endured hardships, Samuel could tell, yet she carried herself with dignity and resilience. Every gesture, every glance, seemed to convey a story that words could not capture. Samuel realized that this silent communication was just as powerful as speech, perhaps even more so, because it demanded attention, empathy, and patience. As the fire crackled, Samuel considered the days ahead. He would need to ensure her safety, teach her how to navigate the ranch, and continue building trust. It would not be easy, but Samuel had never been one to shy away from challenges. He had learned to face the unpredictability of life with calm and steady resolve, and he would do the same now. Rusty, ever loyal, would be their guide and protector, ensuring that the bond between them grew stronger each day. That night, as the wind whispered through the grass and the stars shone brightly overhead, Samuel felt a quiet determination. His life had been simple, predictable, and safe, but the arrival of the woman had introduced something entirely new, a sense of connection, of purpose, and of shared humanity. Samuel understood that the days ahead would test him, challenge him, and change him in ways he could not yet imagine. And yet, he welcomed it, knowing that the quiet life he had cherished was evolving into something richer, deeper, and more meaningful. As he lay down to sleep that night, with Rusty curled at the foot of his bed and the woman resting a few steps away, Samuel could not help but feel that this was only the beginning. The world outside his ranch was vast and uncertain, but within the small circle of firelight, trust was forming, and life was opening up in ways he had never expected. Samuel closed his eyes, ready to face whatever the next day would bring, knowing that his life, and the lives of those around him, would never be the same again. Days passed on the ranch, each one blending slowly into the next, yet each carrying small moments that built a connection between Samuel and the woman, whose name he finally learned was Ahioka. She spoke little, using gestures and simple sounds to communicate, but Samuel found that he did not need many words to understand her. The trust they were forming was quiet but strong, and Rusty remained the silent bridge between them, always alert, always protective. Ahioka had begun to explore the ranch more confidently. Samuel noticed the way her hands moved over the animals, gentle and precise, as if she understood them in ways beyond his own knowledge. She fed the chickens, brushed the horses, and helped carry water from the creek. Though she had endured hardships, she displayed a quiet strength that impressed Samuel. Watching her work, he felt a mix of admiration and curiosity. There was so much he did not know about her, yet each day revealed fragments of a story that seemed both sorrowful and remarkable. One afternoon, Samuel decided to try a new approach. He brought out a notebook and a pencil, setting them on the table outside. "Maybe we can try this," he said, showing her how to draw simple pictures to explain things. Ahioka's eyes lit up with a spark of interest. She took the pencil in her hand and began drawing a small figure next to a horse. Samuel nodded, encouraging her. Slowly, she drew a simple line to represent a path, then a sun above it. Samuel realized she was trying to show him her journey, some part of the path she had traveled before arriving at his ranch. It was clear that Ahioka had been through much, and Samuel sensed the weight of her experiences, even if he could not yet fully understand them. She had lost family, friends, and perhaps even a sense of home, but despite everything, there was resilience in her eyes, a quiet determination to survive and adapt. Samuel felt both humbled and inspired. He had lived a life of routine and solitude, yet now he realized that true courage was not only in facing danger, but in moving forward after suffering. The days on the ranch became a rhythm of learning and sharing. Samuel taught Ahioka how to care for the animals, repair fences, and manage the daily chores. In return, she taught him subtle lessons he had not expected: how to move quietly through the land, how to notice the signs of approaching weather, and how to observe the behavior of animals to understand their needs. Samuel was amazed at how much she knew and how much he could learn from her, despite the differences in their backgrounds. Rusty played an essential role in these lessons. The dog seemed to understand what Samuel could not always explain, guiding Ahioka, nudging her gently when she hesitated, and alerting Samuel to her needs. One evening, as the sun began to set, Rusty barked softly, drawing Samuel's attention to a small rabbit caught in a bush. Ahioka moved quickly, freeing the animal and checking it carefully. Samuel smiled. He realized that their little family, the three of them, had already begun to operate as a team. Each had a role, each contributed to the safety and harmony of their small world. One morning, as they sat near the creek, Samuel tried again to learn more about Ahioka's past. He drew simple pictures in the dirt, pointing to each and asking questions with gestures. Ahioka responded slowly, drawing her own symbols. A mountain, a small village, a river. She was telling him about her journey, about places she had seen, and perhaps about people she had lost. Samuel felt a pang of sadness. The hardships she had endured were beyond what he had imagined. Yet even in her quiet sorrow there was hope. She had survived and she had arrived here, seeking safety and perhaps a new beginning. Samuel began to feel a deep respect for her resilience. She did not complain, did not demand, and did not show fear unnecessarily. Instead, she observed, adapted, and learned. Samuel realized that her strength was not only in surviving, but in the way she faced each day with careful attention and thoughtful action. He admired her for it, and slowly, a bond of mutual respect and understanding grew between them. As the days grew longer and warmer, Samuel noticed subtle changes in himself. He found himself thinking less about his previous solitude and more about Ahioka's needs and comfort. He planned meals, chores, and even small excursions with her in mind. He wanted her to feel safe, to feel that the ranch was a place she could trust. In many ways, he was learning to care for someone beyond himself, and the experience brought a sense of purpose he had not felt in years. One afternoon, a strong wind swept across the plains, bending the tall grass and stirring the dust. Samuel and Ahioka were working on the northern fence when Rusty stopped abruptly, ears erect, nose to the wind. Samuel glanced around, tension rising. Rusty barked again, and they both saw a cloud of dust in the distance. Samuel prepared himself, not knowing whether the approaching presence was friend or foe. As the figure drew closer, it became clear it was a lone traveler, weary and dusty, moving slowly along the path. The traveler, a young man from a nearby settlement, approached with caution. Samuel greeted him, and through gestures and broken words, learned that he had seen strange movements near the edges of the land, perhaps hunters or bandits. Samuel's concern for Ahioka deepened. He realized that the world outside the ranch carried dangers she might not yet fully understand, and he felt a strong protective instinct rising within him. Rusty stayed close, ready to warn them of any immediate threat. That evening, after the traveler had moved on, Samuel and Ahioka sat quietly by the fire. Samuel drew in the dirt once more, trying to show her that he would protect her, that the ranch was a safe place for her. Ahioka's eyes softened, and she reached out to touch his hand lightly, a gesture of trust and understanding. Samuel felt a warmth spread through him. He knew that trust was fragile, built slowly through action and consistency, and that this small gesture represented a major step in their growing bond. Over the next few weeks, Samuel and Ahioka developed routines that strengthened their connection. Mornings were for feeding animals and tending to chores, afternoons for learning, exploring, and sharing silent stories, evenings for quiet reflection by the fire. Samuel taught her the practical skills of ranch life, and Ahioka, in turn, shared her knowledge of the land, how to find edible plants, how to read the wind, and how to move quietly and safely through open spaces. Samuel found himself learning more than he had ever anticipated, realizing that her wisdom extended far beyond the experiences he had imagined for her. Rusty remained the constant, loyal presence throughout it all. The dog's behavior often reflected the unspoken emotions of both humans. When Samuel felt worry, Rusty's vigilance increased. When Ahioka felt hesitation or fear, Rusty's nudges guided her, offering silent reassurance. Samuel could not help but feel that Rusty understood them both in ways he himself could only hope to comprehend. The bond among the three grew stronger every day, creating a sense of family and security that Samuel had not realized he longed for. One quiet evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Samuel and Ahioka sat together on the porch steps. Rusty rested at their feet, ears twitching as he listened to the sounds of the evening. Samuel watched her face, illuminated by the soft glow of the firelight, and he realized that their lives had changed in subtle but profound ways. He was no longer the solitary cowboy, isolated in his routines. He had someone to care for, someone who had already become an essential part of his world. And Ahioka, for her part, seemed to recognize that she had found safety, acceptance, and perhaps even the beginnings of a home. Samuel could feel the rhythm of their lives shifting. Where once the days had been predictable and solitary, now they were shared, filled with small acts of trust, learning, and understanding. Each day brought a new lesson, a new glimpse into each other's lives, and the beginnings of a bond that went deeper than words. Samuel thought about the days ahead, knowing that challenges were certain, but also feeling a quiet confidence that they could face them together. In the stillness of the night, as the stars shone above the vast plains, Samuel felt a sense of peace he had not known before. He understood that life had changed, that the arrival of Ahioka had altered the rhythm of his days, and that the journey ahead would be one of discovery, trust, and connection. He closed his eyes, listening to the soft breathing of Rusty and the quiet presence of Ahioka nearby, knowing that whatever the future held, they would face it together, and their lives would never be the same again. Life on the ranch had grown into a rhythm that felt both natural and comforting for Samuel and Ahioka. The days were filled with chores, learning, and quiet companionship. Rusty remained the steady presence, guiding and protecting them in ways that words could never express. Yet, beneath the calm surface, Samuel sensed that their peace could not last forever. The world beyond the ranch was vast, and dangers existed that neither he nor Ahioka could entirely escape. One early morning, as the sun rose in soft orange hues, Rusty grew unusually restless. His ears twitched, and his low growl carried a warning tone that immediately drew Samuel's attention. He scanned the horizon, but the plains appeared empty and quiet. "Easy, boy," Samuel whispered, trying to calm Rusty, though his own heart quickened. The dog's instincts were rarely wrong. Something was approaching, something that did not belong on the ranch. Hours later, the unease became reality. Dust rose on the distant path leading to the ranch, and figures emerged slowly, moving with purpose. Samuel squinted, realizing that it was not travelers or settlers but men he did not recognize, rough, suspicious-looking, and armed. Their expressions were wary, almost hostile. Samuel's pulse quickened, and he instinctively placed himself between the approaching men and Ahioka. Rusty barked loudly, circling Samuel and Ahioka, ready to defend them. Ahioka froze for a moment, eyes wide, but then she stepped closer to Samuel. Though silent, her presence communicated fear, resilience, and trust all at once. Samuel realized he could not simply send her away, they would face this together. He raised a hand, signaling the approaching men to stop. His voice was calm but firm. "This is private land. You cannot come closer." The men hesitated, exchanging quick glances. Samuel noticed tension in their movements, a combination of uncertainty and suspicion. It was clear they had not expected a defender to be waiting. Rusty barked again, warning them that the ranch was guarded and that Samuel was not alone. Ahioka stayed close, watching the men carefully, her posture tense but composed. Samuel considered his options. He could not fight them outright. He was alone except for Ahioka and Rusty, and though Rusty was strong and clever, the men outnumbered them. He needed a strategy that relied on wit, observation, and the land itself. Samuel pointed subtly to a low-lying patch of tall grass nearby and whispered to Ahioka to follow him. They moved quietly, blending with the terrain, with Rusty leading the way, ever alert to danger. The men advanced, unaware of Samuel's careful positioning. Samuel had chosen the ground wisely. The uneven terrain, coupled with the natural cover of rocks and grass, gave him an advantage. From this hidden vantage point, he could observe their movements and anticipate their intentions. He noticed that the men were not familiar with the land. They hesitated at every obstacle and seemed unsure of the safest path forward. Samuel realized that this knowledge of the land, which he and Ahioka shared, could help them evade danger without confrontation. Hours passed as they moved cautiously, Rusty leading and signaling when it was safe to proceed. Samuel communicated with Ahioka through gestures, pointing to landmarks and using simple signs to indicate direction and timing. Their silent coordination created a rhythm, almost like a dance, where every step mattered and every pause was essential. Samuel marveled at how quickly Ahioka adapted, moving with quiet precision and awareness. Despite the fear that lingered beneath her calm exterior, she was resilient and resourceful. By late afternoon, they had led the men into a natural trap, a narrow passage between two hills where rocks and brush created obstacles. The men slowed, unsure of the terrain, giving Samuel and Ahioka enough distance to circle back toward the ranch. Rusty barked from a hidden vantage point, drawing attention to a distant noise, which further distracted the men and allowed Samuel and Ahioka to slip away unnoticed. Samuel felt a surge of relief but remained cautious. The danger was not entirely gone, only delayed. Back at the ranch, Samuel and Ahioka settled into a small cabin he had prepared for situations like this. Rusty stayed close, ears twitching and eyes scanning the surroundings. Samuel brought out water and simple food, offering it to Ahioka. She accepted quietly, her hands steady but her eyes thoughtful. Samuel could sense the tension lingering in her body, the unspoken reminder that the outside world carried threats they could not always anticipate. That night, as the stars spread across the sky like scattered lanterns, Samuel and Ahioka sat by the fire. Neither spoke much at first. Words were unnecessary. Their bond had grown beyond language. Samuel reached out slowly, placing a hand near hers without touching, a gesture of reassurance. Ahioka met his gaze and nodded faintly, acknowledging both his presence and the shared understanding that danger was part of life, but so was trust. In the days that followed, Samuel took steps to fortify the ranch. He repaired fences, cleared sightlines around the property, and created small safe spaces where he and Ahioka could retreat if needed. Ahioka assisted willingly, her knowledge of the land proving invaluable. She suggested using natural barriers like bushes and rocks to create cover, and Samuel followed her guidance, realizing that her experiences had given her insights he had never considered. Together, they worked silently, their actions coordinated and efficient. Rusty, as always, played a crucial role. The dog patrolled the perimeter, alerted them to distant sounds, and guided Ahioka when the terrain became tricky. Samuel often watched them both and marveled at the unspoken communication that had developed. Rusty was more than a pet. He was a partner, a protector, and a teacher in some ways, bridging the human gap and keeping their small group safe. Despite the tension of potential danger, Samuel found moments of calm with Ahioka. They would sit together near the creek, drawing in the dirt or examining the wildlife, sharing small gestures of trust and understanding. Each day strengthened their bond, teaching Samuel that protection was not just about guarding against threats, but about creating a space where someone could feel safe and valued. Ahioka, for her part, seemed to grow more comfortable in the routines of the ranch, her confidence slowly returning. One evening, as a soft breeze rustled the grass, Samuel realized how much their lives had changed in such a short time. The woman who had appeared suddenly and silently in his life had brought with her a new perspective, a reminder that survival required both courage and compassion. Samuel reflected on the danger they had faced and the resilience Ahioka had shown. It was not just the men outside that tested them, but their ability to trust each other, to communicate without words, and to act with courage under pressure. The night deepened, and Samuel lay in his small bed, Rusty at his feet, thinking about the days ahead. He knew that threats could return at any moment, yet he also recognized the strength that had grown between him and Ahioka. Their bond had become a shield, not only against external dangers, but against the isolation and loneliness that had once defined his life. Samuel understood that life on the ranch was no longer just about survival. It was about connection, trust, and shared resilience. As dawn approached, Samuel awoke to the familiar sound of Rusty's soft whines. He opened his eyes to see Ahioka sitting quietly near the door, watching the sunrise. Her expression was calm but thoughtful, a reflection of the courage and endurance that had carried her this far. Samuel rose slowly, joining her. They stood together in silence, watching the sun climb higher, each lost in their own thoughts yet aware of the shared presence beside them. Samuel realized that their lives had been forever altered. The dangers of the world outside were real, but so was the bond that had formed between them. He felt a quiet determination to protect Ahioka, to safeguard the small world they had built, and to face whatever challenges might come with courage and patience. Rusty barked softly, as if in agreement, and Samuel felt a deep sense of gratitude for the dog's unwavering loyalty. The days that followed were filled with careful vigilance, but also with learning and quiet joy. Samuel and Ahioka worked together, shared moments of reflection, and discovered a rhythm that balanced caution with life. Rusty continued to guide and protect, reminding them both that safety was built not only through action but through awareness, trust, and patience. By the time the sun set on the horizon once again, Samuel understood that the events of recent days had strengthened not only their skills but their connection. He looked at Ahioka, and though words were still scarce between them, he knew they shared an unspoken understanding. They were no longer alone, and together they could face the world. Nothing would ever be the same again, but for the first time, Samuel felt a quiet confidence that change could be good, that challenges could be met, and that life, even with its uncertainties, could be rich, meaningful, and shared. Life on the ranch had settled into a new rhythm, one shaped by trust, shared responsibility, and quiet companionship. Samuel had come to understand that the arrival of Ahioka and the presence of Rusty had transformed his once solitary life into something richer, fuller, and more meaningful. Each day brought lessons, challenges, and moments of reflection that deepened their bond and strengthened their connection to the land and to one another. Ahioka had grown more confident in her surroundings. The ranch, once unfamiliar and intimidating, had become a place of safety, routine, and quiet beauty. She tended the animals with care, mended fences with precision, and even began to explore small areas of the land on her own, always with Rusty nearby. Samuel watched her often, feeling a quiet pride and a deep respect for her resilience. She had endured hardships that he could barely imagine, yet she faced each day with grace and determination. Samuel himself had changed in ways he could feel but could not always describe. His life had once been defined by solitude and routine, by the simple satisfaction of work well done and animals well cared for. Now, his days were intertwined with another person's needs, hopes, and presence. He had discovered a capacity for patience, understanding, and empathy that had lain dormant in his quiet life. The challenges they had faced together had forged a bond that was unspoken yet undeniable, a connection stronger than words could convey. One morning, Samuel and Ahioka were working together in the pasture, mending a fence damaged by a recent storm. Rusty ran ahead, investigating a distant rustle in the grass, his alertness a comforting presence. Ahioka moved confidently, lifting wooden posts and securing wires with ease. Samuel glanced at her and smiled, recognizing how far she had come. She had been weary and cautious when she first arrived, but now she moved with quiet strength, her actions precise and assured. Samuel felt gratitude for her presence, realizing that the ranch had become not just a home but a shared sanctuary. As the sun climbed higher, Samuel decided to take a break. He led Ahioka to a shaded spot near the creek, where the water flowed gently over smooth stones. Rusty lay at their feet, ears twitching as he listened to the sounds of the day. Samuel offered Ahioka some bread and water, and she accepted with a soft smile, a gesture that spoke of trust and comfort. They sat together in silence for a while, letting the warmth of the sun and the gentle murmur of the creek fill the space between them. Samuel realized that these quiet moments were as important as the work they did. They allowed for reflection, understanding, and a deeper sense of connection. He thought about the journey that had brought Ahioka to the ranch, the hardships, the losses, and the courage that had carried her here. He recognized that her presence had not only changed his life, but had opened his eyes to a broader, more compassionate view of the world. In turn, he hoped that the ranch, and the safety it offered, could give her the stability and peace she deserved. Over the next several weeks, their routine continued to evolve. Samuel taught Ahioka more advanced skills, from repairing the barn roof to handling the horses during rides. Ahioka, in turn, shared her knowledge of the land and the ways of nature she had learned from her own experiences. She showed Samuel how to identify edible plants, track the movements of wildlife, and observe subtle changes in the weather. Samuel found that her knowledge complemented his own, creating a partnership that strengthened both their abilities and their trust in each other. Rusty remained the unspoken link that bound them together. The dog's loyalty, intelligence, and attentiveness provided a sense of security that allowed both Samuel and Ahioka to navigate the ranch with confidence. He alerted them to distant sounds, guided them along hidden paths, and offered comfort during moments of uncertainty. Samuel often thought of Rusty not just as a companion, but as a teacher of patience, vigilance, and unconditional loyalty. One afternoon, as the sky turned soft shades of pink and orange, Samuel decided to take Ahioka on a ride through the hills beyond the ranch. The land was open and vast, with rolling plains stretching as far as the eye could see. Samuel mounted his horse and helped Ahioka onto her own, guiding her gently and ensuring she felt steady. Rusty ran alongside them, ears perked, bounding over the grass with effortless energy. The wind blew across their faces, carrying the scents of earth and wildflowers, and for a moment the troubles of the world felt distant, almost non-existent. As they rode, Samuel noticed how relaxed Ahioka had become. She smiled softly, the sunlight catching her hair, and for the first time he felt that she was truly beginning to feel at home. He realized that the journey they had shared, the hardships, the learning, the moments of fear and courage, had brought them to this place of understanding and connection. The land, once a backdrop for his solitary life, had become a shared space of growth, discovery, and belonging. Returning to the ranch, they found Rusty waiting at the gate, panting happily but calm. Samuel helped Ahioka down from her horse, and she patted Rusty gently, her eyes reflecting a mix of gratitude and affection. Samuel felt a deep sense of contentment. The ranch was no longer just his domain. It had become a shared home, a place of trust, safety, and quiet joy. Together, they had built something enduring, a life that was stronger for the bond between them and the care they showed one another. As evening approached, Samuel prepared a small meal over the fire, with Ahioka assisting him. They shared the food quietly, Rusty sitting patiently nearby. The warmth of the fire, the soft glow of the setting sun, and the peaceful rhythm of their actions created a sense of harmony that Samuel had not known before. He realized that happiness could be found not only in solitude or routine, but in the shared moments of care, trust, and companionship. Night fell, and the stars spread across the sky in dazzling brilliance. Samuel and Ahioka sat side by side on the porch, Rusty resting at their feet. They did not need words to communicate. The bond they had formed carried their understanding. Samuel thought about the days ahead, knowing that challenges would come, as they always did. But he also knew that together, they could face them. The trials of the past had taught them resilience, courage, and the power of trust. Samuel reflected on how much his life had changed since the day Rusty had returned with Ahioka. He had been a solitary man, living in predictable routine, content with quiet days and the company of his dog. Yet now, his heart and his life were intertwined with another's. Ahioka had brought not only her presence but her wisdom, resilience, and trust. She had shown him the richness of shared life, the joy of helping someone heal, and the strength found in connection. Ahioka, for her part, had found more than safety. She had discovered a place where she could be herself, where her strength was valued, and where she could contribute to something larger than survival. Samuel had become a source of stability, kindness, and respect, offering her not just shelter but a partnership built on trust. Rusty remained the silent guardian, ensuring that their home remained safe and that their bond endured. Over time, the ranch became a symbol of resilience, trust, and new beginnings. Samuel and Ahioka worked side by side, tending the land, caring for the animals, and sharing quiet moments of reflection. Their bond grew deeper with each passing day, strengthened by shared experiences, mutual respect, and the challenges they had faced together. Rusty continued to guide them, a constant reminder of loyalty, protection, and the unspoken language that connected them all. One morning, Samuel and Ahioka stood together at the edge of the pasture, watching the sunrise paint the sky in brilliant shades of gold. Rusty lay nearby, calm and vigilant. Samuel felt a profound sense of peace and fulfillment. He realized that his life, once solitary and predictable, had transformed into something richer and more meaningful. Through trust, courage, and shared care, they had built a life together that was stronger than any challenge the outside world could bring. As they turned back toward the ranch, Samuel looked at Ahioka and smiled. She returned the gesture, her eyes reflecting the quiet joy and trust that had grown between them. Rusty bounded ahead, ears perked, ready to greet the day. Samuel understood that their lives had been forever changed, not by the hardships they had faced, but by the bond they had forged, the trust they had built, and the courage they had shown. The ranch, once a place of solitude, had become a home filled with companionship, understanding, and shared purpose. Samuel knew that life would continue to bring challenges, but he also knew that together, they could face anything. Rusty, Ahioka, and he had become a family in their own way, a small but resilient unit bound by loyalty, trust, and love. As the sun rose higher, casting warm light over the fields, Samuel felt a quiet gratitude for the journey that had brought them together. He knew that nothing in his life would ever be the same again, and yet he welcomed the change with an open heart. The ranch, the land, the animals, and the bond they shared had given him a new understanding of life, one filled with hope, resilience, and the deep satisfaction that comes from connection, care, and shared courage. And so the days continued, marked by work, learning, trust, and quiet joy. Samuel, Ahioka, and Rusty moved through life together, ready to face whatever came next. Their lives, once solitary and uncertain, had become intertwined in ways that promised growth, safety, and lasting companionship. They had built a home not just on the land but in each other's presence, and in that shared life, they found a peace and fulfillment that would endure through every season to come.